to Music for a While, Westben's podcast devoted to exploring the wonderful world of music. If you have found our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, a really quick and free way to show your support is to leave a review or subscribe to the podcast. If you have found us on YouTube, you may be seeing my silly face for the first time. In that case, hello, my name is Samantha, and I am so glad you are joining us. Click the subscribe button here on YouTube and help Westben reach our goal of 500 subscribers by Christmas time. On this episode, Brian Finley is joined by the author of Tree of Light, which is the inspiration for our upcoming digital concert at the Barn. This guest is a veteran writer and editor. He spent much of his life as a professional opera singer. His memoir, Dr. Bertolo's Umbrella, was published in 2017 and combines all of his many disciplines. Longtime friend of Westben, we have with us today author, opera singer, and all-around fascinating human being, Christopher Cameron. Chris also brings his passion for the arts and his respect for the beauty and power of the written word to his new editing portfolio at Watershed Magazine. Cozy up with your household bubble on December 12th for the free digital premiere of Tree of Light. In this digital concert, Frank Moore narrates the original story by Chris Cameron, with music by Donna Bennett, Brian Finley, Dave Mowat, Dan Foster, and the Westben choruses, along with Christmas wishes and memories supplied by the Westben community. Did you send us your wish? This episode is made possible through the support of our episode sponsors, Canadian Tire Campbellford, Warkworth Community Service Club, Rotary Club of Campbellford, and our Galaxy sponsor, Finley and Associates. Thank you all so much for your support. Be sure to visit westben.ca/sponsors to learn all about our other community partners. And now, please enjoy the conversation between Christopher Cameron and Westben's Artistic Director and Director of Tree of Light, Brian Finley.
Well, there we are. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Chris. Nice to have you here.
Good morning, Brian. It's great to be here.
I got to start by asking you a question. Do you have your Christmas decorations up?
Yesterday, we went and got a tree over by Sterling, so that was one start anyway. Yes, funny, I don't do nearly what the character in the light stringing Tree of Light story does anymore, although I do have a pine tree in my front yard that I could use. But so there is a piddly little string of lights right out on the railing right outside my office window here, about 10 feet long. That's the whole thing. That's it.
Perfect. You know, brevity is good. I think that's good. It's high concentration. That's really good. Well, of course, I just wanted, exactly. I just wanted to thank you so much for this splendid story, Tree of Light. Can you, and this is the story, of course, that's become the backbone of our Christmas special. We'll talk about that in a minute, but can you tell me about this wonderful story, how it came to be, and maybe even what it's about?
Yeah, the story of the story itself, I think, is quite interesting. The journey that it took. In fact, I was writing to my daughter this morning, who is really one of the kids mentioned in the story, that this year won't be able to come for Christmas, kind of thing. But I am the guy who strung the lights in the Tree of Light. When we lived in East York for more than 20 years, until we moved to Campbellford in 2017, and there was a giant old pine tree in front of our house in East York, and it looked awful. It was scraggly, and the branches were, needles were falling off. You could sit underneath it and get hit with falling needles. It was just awful. But once a year, at the suggestion of my kids originally, when they were little, I climbed up this tree with strings of lights slung over my shoulder, and I would string them all the way down, hundreds and hundreds of lights all the way down the tree and light it up. And it got to the point where I couldn't not do it because the neighbors came to expect it. They would walk by and see me up at the top there, and they'd wave to me. And anyway, we did that. I did that for 15 years, and then I finally decided I was too old or whatever. I don't know. But I wrote a personal essay about that experience for Facts and Arguments, which used to be the personal essay page in the Globe and Mail, which is now called First Person. And it was all in the first person, and it was all true. It was about me climbing the story. Then a year ago, a little more than a year ago, Stephanie Campbell, the managing editor at Watershed Magazine, was looking for a piece of Christmas fiction. And I said, I don't have a piece of Christmas fiction, but I have a
Yeah, but fact and fiction is just a stone's throw.
I can morph this into a piece of fiction, relocate it into Northumberland, make references such as the snow we have here, as opposed to the snow that they have in East York, and change it. So that appeared in Watershed Magazine a year ago, and the only difference between that and this year's version is that the only main difference is that we have to deal with COVID this year, of course. So that's going to change the focus of the story a tiny bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that, like every great story, and I think this is a fabulous, fabulous story. It's simple to the point and has a beautiful metaphor to it. This idea of this lit tree guiding a family back home yet again. It's just so wonderful. So with these differences with COVID, like how did you adapt it for that?
Well, it wasn't that difficult. I think in the original story, the man who's up the tree contemplating life and things is hoping that his children will come home for Christmas. And so this year, he knows that unfortunately they can't because we're all being kept apart. But I think the conclusion that he comes to, or that we almost want the reader to come to, or the listener to come to, is that togetherness is not just being physically together. There are all different ways of being together. And this year, we're just finding different ways of doing it. We're finding, obviously we Zoom, or, we talk on the phone, or we have some other way of being together, that a family can be together without being physically at the same turkey, really.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what drew me to the piece as well, too, especially as a Westben project, because of course we've been searching for ways all year long to try and keep bringing people together. Our language, of course, is music, one that you understand really well too. But to bring people together through music, and that's what has made this such a wonderful story to actually augment with music and to feed music around, is that whole draw, is really quite wonderful. You mentioned something interesting there about the snows of Northumberland, and you also mentioned that you relocated to the area. And I think it's really, you and I had a wonderful discussion about the interpretation of this piece when dealing with the beautiful image of snow and the concept of our neighbors in Alderville, our Mississauga neighbors in Alderville, these generations of people who have been here for years upon years upon years, and their connection to the land, their connection to the snow. But I think it's really interesting because you and I came to this point of moving into that kind of a circumstance. So what was it like moving into this community, and because you're sort of a newcomer to the community. I'm still a newcomer too. I'm only 30 years in or something. So
that's right.
I
think that's
feel?
Quite right. I'll be carried out of Northumberland County, and I'll still be considered a newcomer, I'm sure. We've only been here 3.5 years, which, when I say only, I'm not even romanticizing this when I say that it feels like I've been here all my life. It feels like if I wasn't, I should have been. I spent 60 years in Toronto, and it all seems like a blur to me now. Whereas I felt that this became my home right away. We moved, as you may know, there's an island in the river just south of Campbellford called Myers Island, and that's where we live. We live on the island, and we are right on the river. And from the moment we saw the property, it felt like we walked into the house we were meant to live in all our lives, at least the property. And we both feel that way. I wouldn't. I get up every morning grateful that I live here. Now, that in terms of the differences, it's funny because I've been working on, hopefully, a novel, but we'll see, about a small town, and it's supposed to be funny, so it's not romanticized, but a lot of my impressions are going to be contained in that novel, because most of the protagonists in the novel don't come from the small town. They come from outside. And I think that's true, and truer these days, of a lot of us. A lot of us we're not born here. We're from somewhere else and we've come here. I think one of the very universal feelings we have, really, is that once we get here, we feel like we belong here. It's quite amazing. Everything combines to do that.
And we were talking too about the respect that this character has for this tree that he's decorating. You want to talk
Yes,
further about
yeah.
that? Because I think that's a fascinating image.
He's got a love-hate relationship with a tree, right? He, I made an allusion in the text, and not everybody might get it, but he says to the tree, "There are definitely poems lovelier than you." And it's it's really it's an allusion to that poem by Joyce Kilmer where that starts, "I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree." Anyway, this guy, if you actually read, I've written some more about this guy up the tree, and if you read a little more about him, you will learn that he's a high school English teacher. So that's background story for this particular story. But um, he feels that he and the tree have a lot in common in that they're both aging. It's both getting harder and harder for them to do what they do. Harder for the tree to be a tree, and harder for him to climb it and even to live, because he's becoming an older fellow. And I'm sure that you and I can't identify with that ourselves, but
No, I have no idea about that at all. Well, I got to say too that I just found the entire story full of relevance, full of concepts of things like parental responsibility and a duty to keep guiding, keep those things going. And one of the thrills about setting this to music, or at least involving music in its narration, was to gather people around it. Was to it's been a really beautiful journey. You're an opera singer as well too.
well, I have been, yes. My in a previous life,
And how
I
does that?
did.
Well, you're very active as an opera singer, a beautiful one, I might add. And what's the distance between singer and author?
Oh, what a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. Well, of course, the link was that my very first, not my very first major, my very first major link. Let me start that again. My very first major attempt at writing was my memoir about my life as an opera singer, which is called Dr. Bartolo's Umbrella and Other Tales from My Surprising Operatic Life. And I had never written a book before. In fact, I'd never written anything longer than a short story before, and this turned into a book. So either there was enough to talk about in terms of my opera career, or there wasn't. And I did anyway. But I think it's an interesting thing, because to me that's an interesting cross-cultural thing between writing and singing. I was able to take my musical life and turn it into a book. And I think we're doing more and more of this these days. We're not just limiting ourselves to one discipline. So yes, I did sing on the opera stage for, well, 33 years. But that's not all I did. I became a writer as well. In terms of what's similar between singing and writing, is that it's all about communication, isn't it? A singer uses their voice to communicate a musical idea and an emotion, and a writer uses words. A writer puts words on the page. I think they're equally important. The other thing I do, I think I've told you, is that I'm an editor, a professional editor. And one of my mandates for the writers I work with, the authors I work with, is that what they write must communicate clearly to the reader what it is they're trying to say. And I think that a singer learns to do this as well. A singer learns to do this as well. You can sing all you want in the shower, but a professional performer will have the additional mandate of communicating that shower song to an audience so that it means something to them. And I think that's what a writer has to do as well.
Well, absolutely. I think that the communication and the concept of story is another really big one, surely as well too. Just telling a story. Do you think that do you ever think operatically when you write, and take that where you will?
Yes, it's good. It's funny because a lot of people think that opera is bigger than life, which I suppose in many ways it is. And often some of the stories are heroic stories about people who aren't us. Siegfried and Wotan and all those people in the Ring cycle are not us. Puccini and the other people brought it down to the personal level with La Boheme, but it's still a larger than life thing. But I remember working with a director who once said, acting in opera is about taking an emotion and making it and reducing it to the most basic element of that emotion and then making that element larger than life. So in other words, an unsuccessful operatic actor will try to convey 12 emotions all at once,
All right.
whereas the successful one will have taken the principal one and just made that one larger than life. And I try to do that when I write, and I try to do that with the writers, the authors I work with, is to say, what is this sentence trying to say? Is it trying to say too many things in one sentence? If it is, we'll break it down into something else so that we reduce it to the smallest element and then blow that up so that it's a sentence. It's funny. I just
so yeah, no, that's fascinating. In Tree of Light, would you have a single? What did you reduce yourself down to? This single emotion?
Well, it's funny. Often, authors and editors will speak of the theme of a piece of writing. What's the theme? So the theme. A story can have several themes, but I think the theme of this story is the preparations that a man is making for his family. So I think the word family comes very strongly into the story. Now, everything sort of stems from that, right? It was his family, his children, who first prompted him to go up the tree all those years ago and string the lights. It's his family that he's hoping to get together for Christmas in one way or another. Now, all of the other stuff, of course, doesn't have anything to do with family. It has to do with trees and lights and snow and the wind blowing him around and the cold and it's getting dark, everything like that. But the idea of what he's doing for his family all stems from that. So it doesn't always, it's funny because a story doesn't always start with a theme. You don't always say, hey, I want to write a story about my family, and then go on from there. Sometimes the theme becomes more obvious as you write it. And I think that's the case in this story.
Definitely. These truths kind of percolate up and find their way out. Like this poor guy finding his way down to the bottom of the tree. But there's so many images in this piece that I think are really wonderful. And we've tried to play with those a little bit through the music and through how we've actually presented it through the show. I should say to tell everybody too that poor Chris hasn't had a chance to actually see or even hear what we've done to his beautiful piece yet. So I'm really hoping you're going to enjoy it, Chris. It's certainly been surrounded by lots of love and we've really enjoyed playing with it. So it's been great.
It's going to be awesome. I think when you first approached me with the idea of helping the story to its next level using music, especially when you and I talked about the idea that this Christmas was going to be different from other Christmases, that the music could add so much to it, that and a narration. I don't know if I should say this, but I think that you asked me if I was interested in narrating it. And I said no, because I think I sound too young and my voice is too quick sounding for the kind of person that I thought of when I wrote the words. And I think it works out very well that I'm not narrating it.
Well, no, I'm not sure about that, but we do have a beautiful narrator. Frank Moore is our narrator, and Frank has lent it such poignancy. I think you're going to, when he, just his pacing through the whole thing was really, really magnificent. I think you're going to just love it. It caught me again, just as like the first time I read it in Watershed Magazine. It's the same kind of very strong emotional reaction to it. So it's beautiful. So anyway, it's going to be fun to see. So now you haven't stopped with this story. You have continued on, and I know you're writing your novel about small town Canada, or however that's going to take its final shape. But you also have another fabulous story in Watershed for this Christmas.
That's right. I was quite thrilled to be asked to write another one. Now I do, unfortunately, I'm on the staff at Watershed now, so I'm the editor, as you know, but as well as a contributing writer. So, none of that was relevant when they asked me to write another story. But just very tangentially, the man in the story takes place 20 years ago, or a little over 20 years ago. The story that's appearing in this year's Watershed, which is out now, by the way. So it takes place on the eve of the millennium in 1999. I did that for a couple of reasons. One was I didn't want to have to deal with COVID, but also I wanted to produce a sort of a prequel to the Tree of Light story. So very tangentially, I mentioned that this guy has just begun putting up lights in his tree in front of his house, and he wonders how long he's going to go on doing it. It obviously he ends up doing it at least for another 20 years because
Right. Well, it's another beautiful story, and I think we're going to be talking this time next year about that one.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much I prolong the snow theme, because snow takes a big part in the story in Watershed. This issue is called Snow Angel, and the meaning of the title becomes almost immediately obvious when you read the story. But I'm very big on snow around here. It may be that I have this giant snowblower that I like to use on my
Well, we're having a little bit of trouble with snow at the moment, but we can always hope, and it will always come. It's always ahead.
Always.
Anyway, and I think you and I have all kinds of fun stuff to do ahead, and I'm so looking forward to the times when we can get together and do more TikToks together and more chatting about all kinds of fascinating things, Chris. It's just such a delight to have you in our neighborhood here in Northumberland County, up by Campbellford. But I just wanted to remind everybody that this Tree of Light story that Chris has written is going to be featured in our Westben's Christmas special, which is going to be premiered on December 12th at 7 p.m. And you can find it on our website, westben.ca, or you can go to the Westben Digital Venue.ca and you can watch it there. So it premieres on Saturday the 12th at 7 p.m., but it runs for the whole season. So you have lots of chance to see it ahead, and do tune into that. We're also doing a Zoom chat before the premiere at 6:30, and we'll be just sharing some stories and getting all settled in for a beautiful show. So anyway, Chris, I just wanted to thank you for giving us such a beautiful story that has truly brought our community together. That's just been a real joy to have this. So many thanks.
Well, Brian, it's been totally my honor to have you take Tree of Light and move it to what I think of as a higher level, to enhance it in the way that you have. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Well, let's hope. Anyway, we'll see you at the premiere. Thanks so much, Chris. Take care.
You're quite welcome. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, cheers.
Thank you so much to Brian and Chris for that conversation, and thank you for listening. The Tree of Light digital concert at the barn premieres on December 12th at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel and at the digital venue. It will be available here until the new year, so watch it with your family as many times as you would like. Thank you to our sponsors, Workworth Community Service Club, Canadian Tire Campbellford, Covia, as well as our friends, the Rotary Club of Campbellford. And thank you to our Galaxy sponsors, Finley and Associates, for supporting all that we do. For more information, visit westben.ca or email westben@westben.ca. See you next time.